We're going to get started here in a second. We welcome everyone to the joint meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority, as well as the new advisory board of the Utah Transit Authority. I'm Carlton Christensen, chair of the Board of Trustees, and for convenience sake, as we get through the organizing process and over the next meeting or so, I'm chairing, but we'll talk about that, how that could potentially look later on in our meeting. We'll just extend to Mayor Walker asked to be excused today. Mayor Taylor was a good friend of his, and due to some other scheduling issues later in the week, today was the one day he could pay respects, and so he is choosing to be there at the National Guard base when Mayor Taylor's body is brought back, and so he but indicated he would definitely be with us next time. And we know that Mayor Oskowski is soon to come and is busily engaged in giving us a chance to have another Olympics, I understand. So we're all for that. Let's begin with a safety first minute from Dave Garris, and then and go to that point. Dave.
Welcome, I'm Dave Garris. I'm the Chief Safety, Security, and Technology Officer for the Utah Transit Authority. Welcome. You get the entire safety message in 2 minutes here. So you can always ask me questions as we go. Safety is important. It is a core value at UTA. We would ask that you as advisory board members become safety ambassadors, as all employees of UTA are, that you do the right thing and that you represent safety in all that you do. I gave you a lot of things. I want to tell you why I gave you those things. We have a bus pin to celebrate all the bus and paratransit and now the new UVX systems that we have at UTA. You have a Operation Lifesaver pin. We are members of the Operation Lifesaver, which is a nationwide rail safety organization. This is to remind you that it is the red lights at the crossing that control it, not the gate arms. So when you're waiting for the crossing to clear, make sure the lights go off before you proceed. If you don't remember that, there's a little magnet that you can put on the back of your car, which you'll find on all of our non-revenue vehicles and many of our private vehicles at UTA to remind us that it's the red lights that control the crossing. You have a safety wristband that we hand out. This is our opportunity to interact with thousands and literally tens of thousands of customers on our system to remind them about being safe. It's tactile, it's yellow. You'll notice that all of our railroad stations have yellow tactile tiles, so you stand behind the yellow when you're waiting for the trains. And you have a little card here. We have 287 eyes is our security number. Our police dispatch is manned, staff 24/7, 365. So 287 eyes is a number that anybody can call at any time to report any safety or security issue that you might have. They can dispatch police or send appropriate safety response as need be. And these are perfectly timed for the winter weather. You have your train safety toboggan. So when you're out and about, safety includes our health, and you can tell I need to be a little bit more safe with our health, but thank you for being on board. Just real quick, building safety, there are 2 exits from this room. You can go out this door to the side. There's an ADA ramp, accessible door right behind you, or come out the door that you, or exit through the door that you entered into. The flagpole on 200 South is our rallying point if we need to evacuate, and there's an AED system by the elevator if we are in need of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just have to say on a personal note, I watched something that you did once on garage organization and safety in a garage, and now I've been scared to go inside my garage because I realized I'm totally in conflict with everything you do, so I'm going to have to get it straightened out. Maybe before we begin and go to the oath, I just want to take a second and just have folks introduce themselves, and then we'll go to the oath of office ceremony, if that's okay. And I know you're not Mayor Biskupski, but and some of the folks here certainly know who you are, but would you mind?
No, not at all.
Go around the table and
Hopefully the mayor will be here soon. Like Carlton mentioned, she's with the Olympic Committee right now, so she's running a little late. My name is Jennifer McGrath. I'm the Deputy Director of Community and Neighborhoods for Salt Lake City. And former UTA employee, and proud to be here today and very excited for the future of UTA.
great, thank you.
I'm Eric Craythorne, the Mayor of West Point City, and I'm representing the Davis COG.
David Watts, Mayor of Harriman City. I'm representing the Salt Lake COG.
Leonard Call, Mayor of Pleasant View City, representing Weber COG.
Steve Meyer, Interim Executive Director, Utah Transit Authority.
Carlton Christensen on trustee board and coming from Salt Lake County.
I'm Beth Holbrook. I'm trustee, and I represent Davis, Weber, and Box Elder.
I'm Robert Hale, Mayor of Midvale City, and representing the Salt Lake County COG.
I'm Karen Cronin, previous Mayor of Perry City, representing the Tooele and Box Elder COG.
And I'm Bob Biles, Treasurer, Secretary, Vice President of Finance.
Our next order, thank you everyone, and thanks again for taking the time to be here today. Our next order of business is our oath of office. I'll just remind you, you have in front of you a written oath, and that needs to be signed at some point today. We'd ask you to do that, but we would like to have Kathy Griffiths administer the oath of office to the group. Kathy, do you need them to stand or okay? If you wouldn't mind standing, that'd be great.
Please stand and raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will discharge the duties of my office as Advisory Board Member for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Well, next, our item up for business is some general public comment. And I'll turn to Bob. Do you have any comments?
I do not have any comment cards.
Okay, great. Then let's go to an overview of the Public Transit District Act. And Steve, do you want to do that for us?
Thank you, Chair. So we wanted to provide the advisory board with an overview. We've attached in your packet, you have the updated act current with the 2018 legislation that was passed in the legislature this year. The areas regarding the advisory board are highlighted in yellow. But let me give you just a brief overview of what you'll find in there as you read through that. So I'll start from a broader perspective. The advisory board has a responsibility for meetings as defined in the legislation. So to meet at least quarterly to talk about service operations, any concerns with the district operations and its functionality. You meet at least quarterly with and consult with the Board of Trustees to advise regarding the operations and management of the district, and meet at least annually with the Safety and Security team to ensure coordination with local municipalities and counties. We're very proud of the work that we do with our ISO systems of management in safety, environmental, and quality. And so you'll be seeing that. There's some federal we present to the board, and you have responsibility over that. You have duties to represent your areas that you serve, and that involves assisting with coordinated mobility and constituent services. So our customer service, we get a lot of comments in. You're going to get comments as you're recognized in your community as members of the advisory board. So we'll ask that you bring those forward and to us and let us know what you're hearing, and we can help you respond back and how to address those concerns. To represent and advocate the concerns of citizens within the district trustees and hear reports of complaints, comments, and concerns. They are customer service, constituent services folks, and in coordinated mobility will give us presentations on updates of how the system's working from those aspects. The advisory board also consults specifically with the board on board policies, ordinance, and bylaws, the annual budget, public hearings, internal audit plans, annual financial audit reports, contracts and property acquisition dispositions for transit-oriented development. So our primarily developments around our stations, properties that we've acquired or need to acquire for capital projects, or then excess properties that we can dispose of and sell for surplus. Strategic plans for development and operations, our funding opportunities for capital transit and service initiatives. We look at discretionary grant programs that we'll go after, and then we, like example is Salt Lake City providing us, negotiating a service agreement for additional services within Salt Lake City. So you'll get a chance to weigh in on those. The issuance of bonds and other financial instruments, and then our investments of funds. Bob is managing our cash, and he'll provide you with information on how that's going. I hit it, and you were hitting it. Okay. One of us should hit that button. Okay, review and approval functions. So you will receive briefings and have an opportunity to weigh in and adopt the service plans at least every 2.5 years. So we're looking ahead 4 to 5 years out, what our service plans are, and we have change days. We have typically change days in April, August, and December. December and August are turning on and off the ski bus service, and we make other changes to the system as we see needs to adjust routes and timing and scheduling of those routes. Project development plans, that's primarily the funding of all new capital development projects. So we have, we'll review those as they move through the planning phase and become real projects. Similar example right now is the Ogden Bus Rapid Transit project. We're in project development phase there. Final adoption of any plan for transit-oriented development. So as we look at our station locations and move forward with proposed transit-oriented development, you get a review and weigh in, approve those. And then in the legislation, you set the compensation package for the Board of Trustee members. Now, I think that was it. Yeah, great. Any questions I could help you with?
Any questions for Steve?
Thank you. Take the opportunity to read through that, and if you do have any questions, you could send those to me or up through the board, and we'll be happy to get back to you with details on that.
Definitely would welcome those. Next, we'll talk about some bylaws, and I should just mention, as Lisa's coming forward, these proposed bylaws. Certainly, the configuration of the board to a 3-member board is different than the prior 16. So there's a necessity just to have some new bylaws associated with that. Those bylaws by statute will entail also the advisory board. And so we would love your feedback on that, and are looking at an adoption date of November 28th. And so whether it's in this meeting or in the next couple of weeks, if you have concerns or thoughts or recommendations, we certainly would welcome those. And bylaws are never set in stone, and if changes are needed down the road, we can certainly go back and look to address those. So, Lisa?
Thank you. My name is Lisa Bowman. I'm the managing attorney here at UTA. And as you just heard, one of the things that you're charged with is consulting with the board on bylaws. And a little bit of background, the majority of UTA's governance is established in the Transit District Act and also in the Local District Act, but there's things that are not addressed in either of those acts, and those are the things that we need to establish by bylaw. If you thumb through the information that you have, the draft bylaws, you'll see that some areas are underlined. Those are the areas that are not established by statute, and those are, we've drafted some proposed language just as a starting point for those particular areas. One of the things that's silent in both of the acts is the advisory board officers and the duties of those officers. And so that's one of the first things that we wanted to draw your attention to. As is currently drafted, we've provided for a chair, a vice chair, and a second vice chair. Those officers would be elected by majority vote for a one-year term, and there wouldn't be any restrictions on re-election. As you can see, the chair would be responsible for presiding at all advisory board meetings, and they would also serve as the liaison with the chair. The vice chair would fill in those responsibilities in the absence of the advisory board chair, and the second vice chair would fulfill the role traditionally called a secretary. So they would attest to resolutions and other documents that are approved and passed by the board. I'd also like to bring your attention to the voting rights and quorum. We've provided for just 50% or more required for approval of any board action. So that's something else that you might want to take a look at as you're consulting with the board on the bylaws. One issue that has arisen is the use of alternates, and we wanted to make sure that that was a point of discussion as well. As they are currently drafted, we've provided for the provision of alternates. But this board, or the advisory board, would like your input on whether or not you would like to allow alternates, and if so, what is their role? Do they have full participation rights? Do they count towards a quorum? Can they make motions? Can they vote? So those are the issues that need to be decided with respect to alternates. The draft bylaws also allow the board to create standing and ad hoc committees. There are 3 committees that are incorporated into the bylaws, and those are long-standing committees here at UTA. The first is the Committee on Accessible Transportation. That committee's been around for about 20 years, and it provides really valuable information to the board on the accessibility of our transit system. The second is the Pension Committee. The pension plan documents that govern our pension here at UTA have created a pension committee to oversee the pension plan. And so that's why that's included in your bylaws. And then finally, the Audit Committee hasn't been around for quite as long. That was established by the last board to ensure that there was adequate oversight of the internal audit function here at UTA, and also to provide for transparency of those audit findings. And finally, another issue that's silent in the Transit District Act and also the Local District Act is the compensation for the advisory board. And to start the discussion on compensation, we look to the state of Utah's rules. It's R-25-5, and that sets a standard for participants in state boards. It sets a per diem for $60 for official meetings, and those meetings are less than 4 hours. For anything over 4 hours, there's a $90 compensation. Of course, members can decline to receive that compensation, and members are excluded from receiving a per diem if they're full-time employees or full-time officials attending the meeting in their capacity. So that's an overall, that's just a highlight of some of the proposed bylaws, and I'll turn the time back over to you for the discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. I guess we probably maybe go back and look at some of those, and we could go backwards, I guess, on these slides. Or
go back to the
yeah, why don't you go back to the beginning and the question and the makeup of the leadership of the advisory board, and you know, the anticipation is that once selected or elected by the advisory board, that you know, they would set the agenda, they would conduct the meetings, and conduct the business of the advisory board going forward. And I know in different bodies there's sort of this 3-person succession process, or could be 2, but there is a need, I understand, for a secretary or a 3rd position in order to sign resolutions. And so that's at least the draft recommendation in this. Any thoughts or initial reactions, objections, or? Okay. So that's what we'll anticipate. If somehow you get thinking about it, and sometime between now and the 28th, let us know. And then the notion of a quorum, meaning, you know, 50% or more, or I guess it's really 51% or more. Is there any concern about just a standard quorum component? Okay. All right. Sounds like we're okay there. Do you want to go to the next one, Steve? Or... And then alternates. And we went back and forth on this conversation, and then it shows you what short knowledge or memory I have. I'd forgotten that Salt Lake COG had chosen alternates, and I don't know what all the other COGs did. And I know Mayor Biskupski, you asked for Jen McGrath to serve as an alternate. And so how do we treat alternates? And it's entirely up to you. If they're designated, maybe you do want them to be able to vote in your absence and to participate. I just don't know what your feelings are on it. Thoughts?
Yeah.
Let me go to Mayor Hale, and then I'll come to you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Salt Lake COG had 4 selected by the COG, 3 regular members and 1 alternate.
Okay.
That, I would suppose, would mean that the alternate, who's the Mayor Murray, Blair Camp, could substitute for any one of us. Am I thinking correctly, Mayor Watts?
I think that was probably the intent of the COG, was to allow that opportunity. But I wouldn't be opposed. I agree that alternates should be able to participate, whether or not they actually get a full vote. I think that should be up to discussion for this whole group, because I think it's inappropriate for one COG to make that decision for everyone else. So if other organizations feel differently, I'm open to that. But I think the intent was to make sure that there was an opportunity, so that if something comes up, if there's a reason, that there would still be a representation from those communities.
Mayor.
Yeah. So I think it would be extremely helpful. I know, I'm late today because I'm working on the Olympic bid. So I know for the capital city, there's just so much that's always happening, and yet the mayor really needs to be involved, and yet sometimes I can't always be where I need to be. So if there is any way that we could have an alternate, I would very much appreciate that.
Okay.
Mayor,
go ahead, Beth.
Mr. Chair, my apologies. Did you want to include that as a voting alternate? I just wanted to clarify.
Well, if there was no objection to that, I would say yes, because Jen McGrath would be my alternate, and she's extraordinarily well informed, and so I think would serve the committee well. But that's
okay. Let me either Mayor Call or Karen. Do you have any feelings one way or the other, since you weren't in the Salt Lake COG, and I don't know what kind of conversations went in your particular groups? Maybe start with
we never even talked about an alternate. We could certainly designate one, and as far as whether it's a voting one or not, I'm not sure that matters too much to us.
Okay. Karen?
I think that there are times that an alternate would be very helpful to all of us in our busy schedules. The voting would just be whether that person is up to speed. That's always the concern. Just sending in a lay person, I might have some concerns with. So we'd have to set some criteria on what, if they'd been attending meetings, if they knew, the information.
And they can go back. We do stream the meeting. They could certainly go back and watch it, even if they didn't attend in person. There's a way for them to follow up on it.
Well, that was a follow-up question I was going to ask. Is there an electronic policy for people to attend electronically?
There is, right? I'm looking to Lisa, or at least there will be, or in the bylaws, or there's probably existing policy.
In place with the board, but that's also included in our bylaws.
Okay. So yes, you could call in for an electronic meeting. Sorry.
That requires a quorum to be present. Sure. Physically present. The remaining members could join by phone. Is that correct?
Just out of
or did you change
clarification, that's not the way the bylaws are proposed.
I think we modified it because of the nature of the new board.
Yes, that's been modified so that just one person can be here and everyone else can tap in electronically.
So you can call a snow day and
Mayor Craythorne, I didn't.
No, I just kind of sent some of the same comments. If that alternate is an active participant, then I think the voting would be a lot easier for them to be able to feel comfortable with what's going on.
Yeah.
But like Davis Cog, for example, we did not appoint any alternates, and Wasatch Front Regional Council, we have alternates, but I don't believe they have any voting abilities. I don't have a problem if there's an active one that's at the meetings and up to speed, but otherwise I don't think that would be appropriate for all the information that's being shared at these meetings.
Mayor Watts, did you?
Just as we're thinking through this, if we have the ability to vote electronically, do we have the ability to vote via proxy on behalf?
I think it would have to probably be during the course of the meeting itself, and it would have to be verbal because of the open meetings law. I don't think you can vote by email, can you, Lisa? Yeah. So somebody would have to be ready to answer on that. So it sounds like we do want some alternates and participate. It sounds like, are you okay if they count toward a quorum? So please, no.
I think that's one of the best reasons to have them is sometimes, busy. And so if we, like today, we're just barely got the minimum here. So
yeah. Okay. And then the next question is, are they entitled to vote? And I kind of heard a little bit of whether or not they stayed up to date on the thing, and it strikes me that the respective COGs should at least designate who the alternate is, and that's not sort of, in your case, Mayor, I realize Salt Lake City sort of has their own choice, and so I'm not expecting that part. But, thoughts about whether they should vote?
Again, I think that if we do say that they can vote, we need to put in place what constitutes being up to speed, because
that's hard to define. That'll be hard to define. They attend 50% of the meetings, and then who's keeping track?
Yeah.
So,
you have a thought?
But you could think about a scenario where you've had an opportunity. You're not going to be able to attend. That you're sharing, perhaps past minutes or your insights with respect to the items that are on the agenda. So you've in effect briefed up a person, or that alternate could contact staff and get up to speed. So whether or not you're requiring representatives of all your entities to be here every time, or whether there's an option to do that, get them educated and be willing. And if they're not, they could choose not to vote at that time.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It is just tough to define, but that's a good suggestion.
Okay. All right. Let's see. How about for the draft going toward the 28th, we put in that they would have the right to vote. Since you're going to ask the alternate to come in your place, we'll leave it to you to decide if they understand the subject well enough, and that you've either informed them or staff has given the chance to inform them. Am I jumping out too far?
I think that's fine, and then if it doesn't work and we have some problems, we can
go back.
Yeah.
Okay. If we think it's, I'm sorry.
My thought was if for some reason that was not, if it wasn't working as smoothly as you would have liked, then maybe the other COGs could assign someone then to be the replacement, and then that responsibility would be on them to keep themselves up to speed. So either way, that makes sense.
That would kind of be mine. I think that if it's going to be an alternate, it needs to be somebody that's been officially approved by the organization, and that I think it's really up to that particular organization, for that COG or for the municipality to make sure they're the ones keeping informed, and the alternates can only vote if their representative is not there. Just making sure we're including that so that we're not having alternates show up and just happen to to be the third and somebody else just chooses not to vote. So if you're one of the appointed, you need to be there.
That's a really good clarification.
But other than that, I think it's up to those organizations to make that decision. If it's not working for that organization and they don't want to do it, they don't have to appoint an alternate. So I think that gives that control back to those particular areas.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Good discussion. The next item on the, you want to flip it one more, Steve? Or I don't know who's controlling this. Maybe we got through that. And I don't think we needed anything on the bylaws committees, do we, Lisa? Sorry, I don't mean to make you. You got to just nod and
Now
no.
that I'm up here, the red light confuses me, apparently. No action needed. We just wanted to make sure that there was full disclosure about why those committees were included in the bylaws, and that the board has the authority to establish standing in ad hoc committees.
Okay, good clarification. All right, I think that probably gets us through that. The compensation issue, following the Utah Administrative Rule, for those who aren't here on a full-time salary as part of their job. Does anybody have concern over at least offering it to the advisory board member who it might apply to? Okay. All right, we'll include that. It's usually covers your gas and lunch to get here, probably. Okay. So thank you. Again, if you have other thoughts or as you get reading through them before the 28th, we would certainly welcome your feedback at that time. So, Steve, do you want to talk through for you a book presentation on the proposed 2019 budget for the Transit Authority? And Steve, do you want to take us through some of those highlights?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. So this document you have is on our website. It's been sent out to all the elected officials electronically, so you get a little flashcard with that on. And we just wanted to give you the opportunity to have a hard copy as well. So this is out for a public comment period. Currently, it started after our meeting on the 25th when the prior board approved the tentative budget. We had an open house prior to this meeting, and we held the public hearing that's required, but we're in the comment period now through November 30th, and actually we could take comment at our November 12th or December 12th meeting. So the anticipation it would be that we would approve the budget in that December 12th meeting. So that's the process. As the prior board worked through the process and with our strategic plan, they focused on these 5 areas. Wanted staff to put emphasis on these, and we'll go through those quickly. Customer experience, creating a team within the planning department to coordinate our focus. We've done that. We're also working on a project for wayfinding, giving direction to and from our stations to other destinations. So, our customer experience is really important because we are providing a service, and it's interesting to note about 20% of the comments we received through our customer service group are positive comments. So that's really gratifying to us that our team's doing such a great job. Leadership and advocacy, we do reach out and try to be part of the community. So we're meeting with our congressional delegation and our staff and their staff. Recently, we were in Washington, D.C. with Mayor Caldwell, advocating for the Ogden BRT project. And where these grant programs are pretty discretionary, that FTA has the discretion whether to grant those, it's important for them to see the stakeholders and leaders and meet and understand the agency so that we can move these projects forward through legislation or through the grant programs that FTA runs. Our advocacy group for public transit is the American Public Transportation Administration. We are active in that. We have Dave Garris is on committees. Other staff members are on technical committees within that organization. They have meetings to discuss bus and rail and legislative board governance, things like that. So it's very helpful to be a part of that. We were participating today with the legislators' interim committee. We're active. We're on the board of the Wasatch Front Regional Council and Mountain Land Association of Governments. And then we are active with the COGS as well. We're trying to reach out and be accessible to all those groups that have comments for us. And then we're on the board of Salt Lake Chamber, EDC Utah, Envision Utah, Green Bike, and Operation Lifesaver, among other agencies. So access to opportunity is really important to UTA. How do we make those connections? How do we provide for development around our stations that improve ridership and give people access? So that's what we call transit-oriented development. And the example we show here is at our 39th South Track Station. It's the Columbus, we're working with Columbus Center, and it's called their Hub of Opportunity. And that's going to be live workspace for people on the autism scale, as well as some housing for people with disabilities, as well as some market rate housing in there. And right there at the track station, where a lot of those people we've served in other housing that Columbus has owned and operated, where we've had to run our paratransit, that'll eliminate part of that trip for them and put them right there at our track station. We're also working on first and last mile projects in many of your communities, and certainly every one of your counties, with our Tiger Grant project, where we're working those communities, looking at not just pure transit projects, but we're looking at bike repair stations, bike lockers, bike lanes on some of your streets that need those, sections of sidewalk that are missing along your streets that lead to transit to make that happen. And then we're a contributor to the Salt Lake City Green Bike program. We do these transit land use connection studies with the Wasatch Front Regional Council. They help kind of lead that. And you'll see as we go in the future and start talking about our transit-oriented development, looking to have those sites covered by these types of studies to determine with the community what are the appropriate land uses around those stations. So if we advance a project on our site with a proposed transit-oriented development, we can better inform our developers early on what's acceptable to the community and what's going to help promote transit ridership. Then we have a group within the company working on innovative mobility, and that's how to integrate Uber and Lyft and other innovative technologies as to connections with our transit system. They call those disruptive technologies. We see those as opportunities, and we want to connect to those and use those to our advantage and take advantage of all that. We've done some flex routes where we take a route and on demand where you can call in and schedule a ride, and we're continuing to look at more and more opportunities like that. And then strategic funding. How do we look towards where we are today and managing that future out there? As you see the Wasatch Front Regional Council and Mountain Land Association of Governments with their long-range plans, there's a lot of needs out here in the region. We're going to double in size by 2050 or 2060. So how are we going to do that? And roads aren't going to do it alone. There needs to be a strong public transportation component. So SB 136 gave us the opportunity for the fourth quarter sales tax, and counties are considering that or have implemented that. There's a transit transportation investment fund that UDOT manages, and that's going to grow. It starts at about $5 million in 2019 and will grow over time, and UDOT evaluates and awards those funds to transit agencies throughout the state. We've improved our revenue per rider, and we believe a lot of that's due to our PASS program and our mobile ticketing app. So we hope to get you all educated and you're all going to get a transit pass, I think. I think you should all get a transit pass. So you'll be good, but your spouse and the kids that want to ride, they need that transit app to really help them out, get on board. And then you can show your neighbors, get them to ride. That'd be good. All your council members, that's great. Competitive grant opportunities, we are really aggressive looking at what we need to do and what is out there in the government agencies are offering as far as competitive grants, and we've been very successful in acquiring those to advance our program. Our transit-oriented development we've talked about. We are an equity partner. We typically contribute our land to the capital contributions for that project, and then as the project gets built out, we get a return on investment for those, and that goes into our revenue stream. And then the example of Salt Lake City's purchase of service, that's a huge thing for us. Leading out in that where a community is seeing it's of value to dedicate some of their general funds towards transportation transit. The workforce of the future. We're especially right now, we're a very tight economy and low unemployment. How does UTA compete for people in the workforce, and how do we train up the people that we need to do the jobs that we have? We have nearly 2,600 employees at UTA. So, and particularly our operators, our mechanics, our people that work in the rail corridor maintenance way is what we call that. Really a challenge to find them, train them, get them on board. So we've been working with Salt Lake Community College on a mechanic training program. We help them cover some of their tuition costs, give them some internship job opportunities, and show them a place where they can come to work upon graduation. That's been successful. We hope to expand that into some of the other technical areas we have as well. Our culture of continuous improvement is important to us. We hope that you'll get opportunities as time goes on to get down into some of our business units and meet our folks and see the innovative things that they're doing. Not just the business units, but the departments in this building as well, and see how they are working to continuously improve their processes. And that is reflective in some of our benchmarking that we do with other companies on the bus side and light rail side that shows our effectiveness against our peers, and we do very well. Our challenges are the challenges of this region. So population growth, how do we continue to grow to meet the demands of that growing population? How do we benefit to the improving the air quality? How can we provide access to everybody who needs access to our system? We have 6,200 bus stops, over 6,200 bus stops in the system. How do we make sure those are all accessible? How do we provide systems that are accessible and allow people to ride? The disruptive technologies I talked about earlier, and then just sustainable funding sources for us to go on that we can plan and program new routes, new capital improvements, and we know that we have not only funding to build that and implement it, but the ongoing operation and maintenance. So those are all important to us. So that forms the basis to our budget, and I'll let Bob take over and talk about the specifics of the 2019 budget.
So as you go through the budget book, part of what you'll find is more description of these particular changes from the 2018 budget. Obviously, we have some full-time Board of Trustee members now, and they were voluntary before, so that's a cost that we've had to include. And we've tried to move some of our FTE to handle that cost. So you'll see those changes. We do have service changes down in Utah County. The UVX system will have a full year of operations. It opened in August of this year. And we also added a 10th frontrunner train. That's part of the result of the positive train control that we've been implementing and some of the restrictions that's put onto the system. Of course, we've talked about the new funding. We'll talk about that a little bit later from Salt Lake City and from the county. And then we've got a complete list of capital projects in the book that we'll talk about. So some of the cost drivers, we started out with our 2018 service plan and then looked at how could we increase bus service in the various counties. The largest increase obviously is in Utah County with the UVX system. We've got some lump sum dollars in right now for Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County service. The decisions of how that money gets allocated is still being discussed, so it's just a little early to allocate that. As far as labor and fringe, we've got 3.5% on our bargaining unit. That's part of the collective bargaining agreement that's in place and that expires at the end of next year. And so we'll be doing some labor negotiations over this next year. For administrative staff, it's a 3% increase also. One of the biggest cost drivers is our fuel. Our diesel fuel is about 600,000 gallons. 6 million gallons a year. So this is a big number for us. Every 10 cents is worth $600,000 a year. That's the way to think of that. So we're going from $2.20 to $2.50. As you know, diesel prices have been going up. So this is our estimate using some of the national information that's available. And we do have a fuel reserve. As you look through the budget book, we do have a fuel reserve of about 30 cents per gallon in case it goes above the 250. Here's the new funding from Salt Lake City. We've put in $3.8 million. We're refining that for the final budget. Salt Lake County has implemented the quarter cent sales tax, and that's a half a year's, our estimate's about $13.4 million. And you'll see that we've got $1.9 million of that going to reserves. The current board policy is 14.3% of those kind of revenues go into a reserve fund to help with our payroll, accounts payable, just the day-to-day fluctuations, as well as a 5% service sustainability fund that's there in case we see another economic recession. That's enough money for the board and for the advisory committee to talk about what happens with service. Where do we make strategic reductions? Do we need to make reductions? So that's what that reserve is. Now we'll do some of the financial summaries from the budget book. The budget book has a lot more information, but these will mainly go over sections 2 and 3 in the budget book. Section 1 has a bunch of information about our policies and things of that nature, how our budget process works. And then the 4th section has more detailed information about the various departments, headcount, expenditures, major line items. So starting out with our 2019 projected operations, this is pages 17 through 34 of your budget book for more detail. This just gives a high-level look at how the money goes out. $454 million. About 60% of it goes to operations and operations support. About 9% goes to administration. We've got $119 million for debt service. That's bond and interest, as well as about $8 million in lease payments. And then we have this thing called early debt retirement. That is also another policy that was implemented in 2012. And what it says is, layman's terms, that if we have savings from a refunding, we capture those savings, what we would have spent on debt service, put it into a fund to retire debt early. Right now, our projections is we'll have about $98 million in that fund in 2022 when our first opportunity to retire debt will show up. Heading on to revenues, that's pages 35 through 39 of the budget book. It provides more detail about the various revenue sources. As you can see, we have 3 main ones. Sales tax makes up about 68%, 69% of our revenues, followed by federal preventative maintenance dollars. Those are dollars we get from the federal government based on an allocation formula. The more service we provide, the more percentage of that we get. The converse is true. If another agency provides more service, we get a little bit less. We get about 0.7% of the federal funds in that allocation formula. And then we have some passenger revenues, about 12%. The other revenues, about 5%. We've included the major classifications for each of those. Investment income has been growing over the last few years as rates go up and as our balances have been fairly stable. So some of the major changes in the revenues, sales tax, we've already talked about the $13.4 million coming from the Salt Lake County fourth quarter. We're also budgeting a 5% increase. That's about $14 million over our projection of $284 million for this year. We're seeing a 7.6% growth rate right now. For 2018, though, we've projected 6.9%. Obviously, if it comes in over that 6.9%, that's good as we go forward in our future budgets. Passenger revenue, we're estimating will be up just a little bit. We have some contracts that have been signed that we think will bring that number up. The federal preventative maintenance dollars, the federal government increases the size of the pie every year. And then because of some of the service we put in, you have to wait 7 years before you become eligible to get the preventative maintenance dollars. Well, we added rail lines in 2011, 2012. So we should get a little bit bigger piece of that pie. Again, we talked about the investment income because of the higher rates. Talk about capital and debt now. And you'll find that on pages 43 through 51. We go into great detail on all the projects. You'll find that, I think, on page 50 and 51. We list the individual projects, how we classify them, and then the revenue source for each of those. You'll notice we've got several things called SGR, that stands for State of Good Repair. One of the things that we're very keen on, as Dave talked about earlier, safety is very important to us, and we have to make sure our system's safe for our riders and for our patrons and for those who cross our systems. So we spend a lot of time looking at how much we need to devote to the State of Good Repair. Fortunately, we're still a relatively young system compared to other transit agencies around the country. And so we're just, we're a beta site for testing some software, and we're still a young system just getting into this and learning what that's going to look like in the future. And again, there's a bunch of other capital projects. We've listed some of the larger ones over on the left. You've got the entire list on page 50 and 51. And again, we listed the revenues on those pages. Talk about a couple of things. Steve talked about grants. If you'd looked at the 2018 budget, you would have seen grants was $26 million. So we've been successful getting some grants, especially for the new Depot District Maintenance Facility. It'll be right behind this building that replaces the maintenance facility over there. We have to replace that facility if we want to provide the kind of service that people want to see in Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. And then there's 2018 bond proceeds. We did issue some bonds earlier this year. Those monies will be spent over 2018, 2019, and 2020. So these are the revenues supporting the capital projects in 2019. And then we've had a lot of local partners, a lot of you, helping out with a lot of the first mile, last mile projects. So the next steps, as Steve said, we've started our public input part. We had the public hearing earlier today. We accept public comment all sorts of ways. Email it, mail it, phone it, however you want to get it here, we'll accept it. It's through November 30th. And then we'll update the budget book to a final budget book to present to the board on December 12th.
Any questions for either Bob or Steve?
Yes, thank you. So I'm trying to follow what's happening in Utah County, and on page 45, it looks like there's a $2.5 million budgeted number for 2019 for outstanding acquisition. And can you share with me what that looks like, and is that part of the 3.5 million on the next line that is about operating costs that are increasing also, or is that just a right-of-way acquisition of some sort on its own? So it's 2.5, and then so it's a capital project.
Yeah, so the 2.5 million is just finishing the capital work for the project. Even though it's in operation, there's still work to be done. We think there'll be about $2.5 million of capital work to be done next year. And then I'm getting older, the $3.5 million, that's just the total annual operating expense increase for that particular route over what was there before. So there was a Route 830 that was there before that cost us a certain amount of money. The increased cost of the UVX is about $3.5 million. And Utah County is giving us $2.5 million to help support that.
Oh, so that's a separate $2.5 million.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Other questions? And we know that really for probably nearly all of you, if not all of you, this is probably new to you. So as you get looking through it and you have questions, I know Bob or Steve or I, although start with the other two first because you'll get the better correct answer. But we're happy to make sure you at least have any understanding. And I think earlier I may have said December 14th, but I think it's December 12th, and I just have my dates wrong. But we'll look to that time frame for potential adoption. Yeah.
I was going to ask this at the end of the meeting, but I think it's appropriate now, and that's just maybe a contact list with emails and phone numbers of.
That's a great suggestion. We'll get that out here in the next day or so. Good. Well, let's along that line. Next meeting. Now, I think we coincided with our normal board meeting, but really, we ought to figure out a time that's convenient for you. Oh, wait. You want to go through the schedule? Sorry, Steve. I slipped past that.
No, that's right. So you have this legal size sheet, and this shows a proposed schedule for what we're talking about. So as I went through those board responsibilities and that, this reflects that and proposes a meeting schedule. So the law says you're going to meet at least quarterly, and I think we have 6 meetings proposed for the end of this year going into next year. And
is it 5? I think 5.
5.
I'm getting the
okay. Okay.
The other 6.
I'm good. I can say whatever I want, and you'll correct me later.
But it could be more if you chose to.
Yeah.
But we're anticipating 5.
So you can kind of see the flow where we're at today with the November meeting, proposing a meeting again in December to where you would nominate and select your officers and firm up your schedule. We do need to publish a proposed meeting schedule and post that publicly. Then we would look towards January. We'd get you started on transit-oriented development policy. We're feeling some development pressures along the corridor, and we'd like to get that policy and plan, inform you on our 2019 audit plan that we're finalizing through staff now, and then looking at capital projects, capital projects will come along in March. And March would approve the TOD plan, get you started in capital projects, discussion on our core route study, a study that's going on looking at what direction should we use going forward, planning our bus service. And we'll inform you of that more as we're going along. Then looking at a meeting in May or June, we start really looking at we look back at our financial audit and our CAFR, start looking at budget-wise, looking at our 2020 capital budget. At that point, it ties in well with our schedule for safety security. We have an audit, and then looking towards September, where we're really focusing on the operating and capital budget, putting you in that process for the capital budget approval. That's where we would set the compensation for the trustees to include in the budget for 2020. Looking at the 5-year mobility service, which is a service plan, and approving the 2020 to 2025 capital plan. And then we'd just be cycling back through again. I believe you're always welcome to participate with the board meetings and that, but these would be specific proposed advisory board meetings.
Mayor?
Will we be involved in some way on the selection of the executive director?
We haven't devised that process just yet, but I certainly would. I guess I would foresee with that that there would be a likelihood, at least the leadership of the advisory board would have some participation in the interviews and things. But to be honest, we haven't really talked about it yet. I mean, we know it's coming, and we're going through that process. But I would anticipate there would be some level of participation.
Maybe perhaps we could submit some ideas on what the selection criteria
you
might want to consider.
And we can certainly circulate a draft of the job description that we're anticipating.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? So I guess future meetings, the next meeting, we're suggesting potentially a meeting in December where you would then select your chair and your first vice chair and your second vice chair. And then they would, of course, take it from there. And there's probably maybe some early stuff that we might, talk about that preps you for your January discussions and stuff. Is there a day that's better for you, a time of day? It could be morning, it could be over lunch, it could be, in the afternoon. What works? Is there a day a week? There's a day not to do?
I wonder if we could do like a doodle poll.
Okay.
And see how that plays out.
Okay. Well, let's do that. Is there a day we should absolutely avoid? Or Christmas Eve, right? And probably not a Friday. And you have council meetings on Tuesday, or so we'll probably avoid a Tuesday, and so we'll look. Okay, but that's a good suggestion. Let us do that, and then hopefully, maybe even based on that pattern, we'll propose a 2019 schedule. So as you mark that, if I'm remembering dual poll correctly, there's some comments there. If there's sort of a standard time so you can schedule around it. If you want to give some thoughts of, like this time is where we ought to have our regular meetings kind of thing, that would be helpful. All right. Am I missing anything else in that?
No, but maybe we could take a chance to swear Mayor Biskupski in.
Okay.
I was just wondering, have we got any of the comments back for the public comment on the budget yet that you could forward out to us so
Sure.
that they're not a last minute thing?
Yeah, no, that's a great recommendation. Mayor Biskupski, we're going to invite you to stand and then.
Raise your right arm, please. Repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will discharge the duties of my office as Advisory Board Member for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity. Thank you. Congratulations.
All right. If there are no other items, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay. All in favor? Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for being here, and this will conclude our meeting for today.